Access versus Ownership, Scale, Automation, and the New Economic Order. Section 1, Introduction. The shift no one voted for. For most of the post-war era, Western societies operated under an implicit assumption. Growth would continue, ownership would expand, and each generation would accumulate more assets than the one before it. The system was not merely economic, it was civilizational. It fused rising labor income, expanding credit, and broad property ownership into a stable social contract. That contract now appears strained. Demographics are reversing. Debt burdens are high. Automation is accelerating. Asset prices have detached from wage growth. Local economic ecosystems are being absorbed into platform-based systems. Governments are exploring new tax bases. Ownership, once synonymous with security, increasingly carries recurring costs, regulatory friction, and political tension. The shift unfolding is not a singular policy change. It is structural. We are moving, gradually, unevenly, from a distributed ownership society toward a coordination-based access economy. This transition raises a deeper question. Who will design and control the coordination systems that replace broad ownership, and can they preserve human agency while harnessing scale? 2. The post-war model, distributed ownership capitalism. The system that stabilized Western societies after 1945 rested on several reinforcing pillars: expanding labor force, high birth rates, immigration inflows, rising workforce participation. More workers meant more contributors to pension systems, more borrowers, more consumers, and a constantly expanding tax base. Rising productivity and cheap energy. Industrial expansion, technological diffusion, and abundant energy allowed wages to rise alongside output. Productivity gains supported asset accumulation. Broad asset ownership. Home ownership expanded dramatically. Pension funds grew. Stock market participation widened. The middle class became asset holders, not merely wage earners. Debt growth equilibrium. The crucial stabilizer was arithmetic. Nominal growth outpaced debt servicing costs. When growth exceeds interest burdens, debt becomes manageable. Welfare promises remain credible. Political stability holds. Localized market structure. Commerce was geographically embedded. Local banks, local retailers, local service providers. Economic life had physical anchors. This configuration produced what might be called distributed ownership capitalism, a system where property and production were widely dispersed. Section 3. Structural pressures breaking the model. That model now faces simultaneous pressures. Demographics. Fertility rates below replacement across much of the West, rising dependency ratios, slower labor force growth, immigration politically constrained in many regions. The tax base built on expanding labor is narrowing. Fiscal arithmetic. Public debt levels are historically elevated in many Western states. Entitlements, pensions, healthcare, social safety nets are politically and legally entrenched. When growth slows, labor stagnates, and interest rates normalize, the math tightens. Governments face limited levers. Raise taxes, cut spending, inflate. Restructure. This is not ideological, it is arithmetic. Automation and artificial intelligence. Automation introduces a structural shift in factor dominance. Robotics reduces labor demand in production. Artificial intelligence reduces labor demand in services. Capital becomes increasingly productive relative to labor. If output becomes less dependent on human labor, labor-based taxation and wage growth become less reliable pillars. Productive capacity may rise, but distribution mechanisms must adapt. Geopolitics and industrial reconfiguration. Simultaneously, defense spending is rising. Energy systems are being re-engineered. Supply chains are regionalizing. Climate commitments require large capital mobilization. All of this increases fiscal pressure. The system designed for expansion is now operating under constraint. This content is brought to you by Bobby Giggs. Promote your brand here and reach a wide audience across platforms like YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Follow the links in the description to get started. Section 4, IV. The emergence of the access-based system. As ownership becomes more expensive or complex, access models proliferate. Subscription structures. Software as a service, streaming media, mobility services, cloud infrastructure. Recurring access replaces one-time ownership. Platform dominance. Amazon aggregates retail. Google aggregates search. Meta aggregates social identity. Economies of scale lower costs, but centralize coordination. Local high streets decline. Warehouses replace storefronts. The economic geography shifts from distributed nodes to centralized platforms. Ownership as burden. Homeowners face rising property taxes, insurance costs, homeowners association fees, maintenance inflation. Asset price appreciation does not eliminate recurring carrying costs. Ownership becomes both asset and liability. From property to permission. In an access-based system, you do not own the infrastructure. You access it. The system shifts from tangible property rights to platform-mediated permissions. Section 5. Economies of scale. Efficiency versus concentration. Scale can dramatically reduce costs. Examples include modular housing built at factory scale, mass-produced electric vehicles, automated manufacturing systems. Large-scale coordination compresses costs through standardization, vertical integration, automation, bulk procurement. The efficiency argument for scale is real, but scale introduces concentration. Monopolistic tendencies can emerge because network effects compound, switching costs increase, and capital intensity rises. The tension becomes, can we achieve scale without coercive centralization? Section 6. Distributed scale. Blockchain and aggregated capital. A potential counterweight to monopoly scale is distributed aggregation. Blockchain systems attempt to aggregate capital globally, enable permissionless participation, reduce centralized intermediaries. Stablecoins illustrate how digital rails can aggregate dormant capital, create new demand for sovereign assets, lower transaction friction. This is coordination without a single corporate monopolist, at least in theory. The open question is whether distributed systems can sustain scale while preserving decentralization. Section 7. Taxation in transition. If labor becomes less central to output, tax systems must evolve. Debates now include asset-based taxation, wealth taxes, unrealized capital gains, fiscal drag through threshold freezes, property reassessments. The implicit shift is from taxing income generation to taxing asset ownership and capital appreciation. This fuels the inference behind phrases like, you will own nothing. Whether exaggerated or not, the structural incentive shift is observable. Section 8. The moral and political dimension. When the arithmetic tightens but promises persist, intergenerational tension rises, legitimacy weakens, polarization intensifies. The risk is not merely economic instability, it is moral incoherence. A system that appears to protect asset holders while burdening wage earners undermines consent. Automation without distribution reform risks social fracture. Section 9. The coordination race. The emerging world is a race to design superior coordination systems. Winning systems possess network effects, settlement finality, regulatory tolerance, capital gravity, talent attraction. Robotics companies aim to coordinate physical production. Digital platforms coordinate information and commerce. Financial rails coordinate capital. The hill remains intact only if coordination systems preserve stability. If legitimacy collapses, the hill erodes. Section 10. What becomes scarce? In a high-scale, automation-driven world, scarcity shifts, not capital, not compute, not automation. Scarce becomes independent agency. Resilience outside platforms, governance credibility, non-captured coordination, human stewardship. Efficiency may be abundant. Legitimacy may not. Section 11. Stewardship and agency. Understanding structural shifts provides agency, not to exploit collapse, but to guide transition. Stewardship requires diagnosing constraints honestly, designing coordination systems that preserve sovereignty, embedding portability and exit into platforms, balancing scale with pluralism. The task is not to resist scale, it is to civilize it. Conclusion. Designing the post-growth order. The post-war ownership society was built on expansion. The emerging order is built on coordination under constraint. The shift from ownership to access is not ideological. It is structural. The central challenge of this era is harnessing automation and scale without surrendering agency and legitimacy. The transition is path-dependent. The outcome is not predetermined. The question is not whether coordination systems will dominate. The question is whether they will be designed to serve humanity or merely aggregate power.